Well, I know I didn't call this. So, Venom opened really well. It opened with an $80 million opening weekend. I think it had the biggest, it definitely had the biggest preview night in October in history, which, that's the Thursday showing. I'm pretty sure it's also the biggest October opening weekend overall. It broke that record. It did about $80 million in the US, about 120 international, which means it's already made $200 million. Its original budget was $100 million, which means it's already broken even. So whatever it makes after this is profit, or at least as far as anybody's concerned, because actual production numbers are iffy because they don't factor in marketing costs and all that stuff. But this is a hit. This is a bona fide hit. So what does this mean for the future of Sony's plans in terms of what have they talked about that they want to do? Spider-Man related properties. Well, the most immediate sense, you can definitely count on the fact that we are going to get a sequel to Venom, which is good because they very blatantly set up a sequel to Venom in the mid-credits trailer, teaser at the end of Venom. So I am going to talk about that. I think word probably got out on what that was, but if you want to avoid that, you might need to turn the video off, because I'm going to be leaping off from that at least for a decent stretch of time. So that mid-credit scene did set up Cletus Cassidy being played by Woody Harrelson in like a Ronald McDonald wig, and who will be Carnage. Now, the way that Carnage will manifest, not yet entirely clear, as far as whether it will actually be a seed from Venom himself, or if it'll just be another symbiote. I think it should be a seed from Venom, because I think Venom needs that element of guilt, that sense that he helped create this thing. That's a big part of the dynamic, and I think it was a little bit of a gambit for them to both hold off and blatantly set up Carnage, but I think it was also the right call in a bit like it was a really smart call that Batman Begins didn't use the Joker and instead set it up for the next one, so basically the Joker could bat cleanup in the Dark Knight. And it's a similar thing with Carnage, because when you think about Venom and Venom's enemies, who's he gonna fight? Well, number one would be Spider-Man, but that's just not happening. And then number two is Carnage. So that's now been that's been set up. Again, we don't know how Carnage is going to end up with the symbiote. Here's the worrying thing right now. Producer Avi Arad, who has been producer on the Spider-Man related properties since the Sam Raimi movies, and who has been trying to get Venom made for a long time. I'm sure he feels vindicated as heck with this box office take. He has indicated that it should not be taken as a given that including Carnage means that the sequel gets R-rated. Now, coming back to what I said before in my review of Venom, you could really tell what had been cut down. You could tell that they cut away from so many, Venom bites a guy's head off, or, there are people thrown into walls where, like, his head cracked, like, there should be blood splatter there, and things like that. That's all toned down for a PG-13. And they got away with it for the most part. I mean, like I said, you can tell, but I think structurally the fundamentals of the film still work, even though, as they work as well as they would have an R as a PG-13. Carnage's whole deal is not just massive body count, it's brutal massive body count. Like that's his whole thing. He is insane before he gets a symbiote. So, like, him being a complete over-the-top massacre machine is kind of the point of him. And I don't know how you tone that down and still have the character feel like Carnage. Like, I mean, from a practical standpoint, they can do basically what they did with the first Venom movie, which is, to cut away and not have a lot of actual blood, not do arterial spray or what have you. But that just, doing that with Carnage would feel like even more of a cop-out than doing it with Venom. So, yeah, I actually haven't heard much. I don't think there was quite the fan backlash to the final result of the film being PG-13 instead of what a lot of people had felt was originally promised to be an R-rated movie. I don't think there has been as much backlash as I would have expected about that, but I do think, at the very least from fans, that if they hear Carnage is going to be in a PG-13, they're going to get real squirrely about that. Now, that said, I did put the emphasis on fans because, mainstream people probably won't really care. So the Venom sequel, that's absolutely happening. As far as the other spin-off stuff that's been announced goes, the one that is the most likely to come next, because it actually has a lead cast, would be the Morbius movie. Morbius the Living Vampire, and that would be Jared Leto. Now, there is something very odd that I noticed about the Venom movie, which is... Now, my knowledge of Venom is based off when I read his stuff, which was in the 90s. So I don't know if this sort of thing got integrated later on. At least when I was reading Venom, he didn't have to eat people. Sometimes he would, or at the very least, he would frequently threaten to. And I think maybe once or twice he did, but... At least when I was reading Venom, the suit did not have to be fed. Whereas in the movie, sort of the deal is if the suit doesn't eat for too long, it basically starts cannibalizing Eddie. And then Eddie, makes the deal with it. If you're going to eat people, you can only eat bad people. Now, the reason I bring that up is because that whole struggle and final conclusion, that's Morbius's deal. I mean, Venom held the title of Lethal Protector for a reason. He did tend to kill people, but it wasn't because the suit needed to feed. It was because he was a violent guy who did excessively violent means to try and solve things and be a hero. So having him come to this conclusion, if I must feed, let it be on the blood of those who would attack the innocent or whatever, like, that's Morbius's entire shtick. So I say Morbius is most likely to come out next, again, because it has a star attached to it already. It runs the risk of being incredibly redundant because they kind of jacked Morbius's deal and gave it to Venom. So I don't know how well that's going to play out, or how potentially derivative that could feel. As far as the release of these things, Sony would do well to insert something else between either this first Venom movie, between a Venom movie and Morbius, whether it's this one or the sequel. They are really going to want to get something else in the middle there so that it doesn't just look like they are using the exact same narrative template and stamping it onto these various characters. I mean, granted, this is the template and the concept that is actually what Morbius is in the comics, but again, they kind of aped it already with this first Carnage film. So some of the other stuff, it's tougher to call. So in terms of what's been announced, there's the Silver Sable movie, there's the Black Cat movie, there's the Jackpot movie. What? And supposedly still the Sinister Six. Now, I would say of those, I would say either Silver Sable or Catwoman would be the next most likely, just because odds are those are going to be lower budgeted affairs, probably not as special effects heavy, easier to put together in a not too expensive in timely fashion. Whereas, and the Kraven the Hunter movie. Forgot about that. But certainly something like Jackpot or even Kraven the Hunter, requires more elaborate action stuff than you are required to do with Silver Sable and Black Cat. Not to say that Silver Sable or Black Cat aren't very capable in action scenes. They are, but they're and especially with Black Cat, the concept does not require that level of expensive action, especially because in both cases they're just people. They're just women who are good at what they do, but we're not dealing with the expense of big CGI monster things with any of that. So I think one of those is more likely, whereas if you do Jackpot, you're looking at some comparable expenses to at least a lower tier Spider-Man movie, because she's got she's all swinging around, and so you need to be prepared for those kinds of action scenes. Probably gonna have to CGI double her for a whole bunch of stuff. So yeah, I would say most likely after and I would say again, ideally before, but I'm not counting on it. The Morbius movie would be either the Silver Sable or the Black Cat movie. Flip a coin, could be either one. But yeah, then after that, there's Sinister Six, there is Kraven, there's Jackpot, and there's probably other stuff percolating as well that they just haven't announced yet. Sinister Six, for my money, they hold that off because I bet you that they want to try and tie directly into the Spider-Man movies. So that might involve closer negotiations with, say, Marvel. Because right now, Marvel is absolutely free to completely ignore the Venom film, which is why, Tom Holland did not cameo in it. And there aren't any explicit connections to the existing MCU in that movie, because right now Marvel is shrugging and going, look, you go do your own thing, but it's not part of our thing. Whereas Sony's going, maybe it will be one day, you never know, which is their hopeful wishing that they are so successful that Marvel will want to integrate this thing that they've done. I actually don't think that's a good idea at this point. I don't think it's going to be a good idea to take this Venom and have him face off against Spider-Man, because I don't know how you build that motivation. Because historically, the hatred that Eddie Brock has for Spider-Man is all prior to him getting the suit and becoming Venom. And aside from just, I don't know, Peter Parker takes a trip to San Francisco for some reason and just gets in a scrap with him, like, I don't know how you get them at odds, because they're geographically nowhere near each other. And with Venom, and the thing is, even if like Spider-Man came in and like captured him and arrested him or whatever, that wouldn't justify the level of hatred that we are used to seeing Eddie have towards Peter. So I at this point, with how they've managed to establish Venom as a standalone character and franchise, I don't think he's actually going to cross over well with Spider-Man, because I don't know how you build the motivation that is really key, motivating his hatred, which is so absolutely key to this entire dynamic and relationship. So I have no doubt Sony would love to make Venom a confirmed part of the MCU. I don't think it should happen, and I don't really see it happening. But Sinister Six, I wouldn't be shocked if they're trying to keep that a little bit tighter in with Marvel. But again, we'll see. I would expect if they move forward on a Sinister Six movie, it's going to include some of the characters we've already seen. Feasibly the Vulture, I would say almost definitely the Scorpion, possibly the Mysterio, who's apparently going to be introduced in the next one. So, who knows? But one thing I can tell you is there's no question we're getting a Venom sequel. And I think even if that does decent but not great, we get at least one other thing from Sony's current planned slate. And again, for my money, it's the Morbius movie. I think at this point, it's going to take two flops to properly derail this, because since they've had their first genuine hit, unless the sequel I'll revise that. If the Venom sequel bombs, that's going to throw things off. But assuming that that doesn't happen, which I doubt it will, because Sony is pretty stingy. So for my money, they are not going to grant a ton more money to making Venom 2 than they did to Venom 1. And with how strong the first one performed, I would expect the second one, even if it is not received in general as well as this one, that it will still, it'll still make its money back. I have a hard time imagining a scenario in which it doesn't. So I'm kind of taking that as a given. But, if the Morbius movie flops, they'll still have had, 2 successes most likely under their belt up to that point. So they'll try again with something else. I think it takes 2 serious flops before Sony severely reconfigures its plans. I think right now they're just going to move forward bold as brass with what they've got and what they've announced. So yeah, the Sony Spider-Man-less Spider-Verse is a thing that's going to happen. Oh, and yeah, Into the Spider-Verse is another thing that's happening. But I really feel like that's a completely separate beast, and that being successful will, or flopping, will not make or break any of the live-action stuff. So those are sort of my thoughts on the current status of Sony's slate. In other words, it's happening. Expect most of it to happen at this point. So, what are your thoughts on it? Whatever they are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. There's a whole bunch of stuff to do because there's buttons and there's links, including a link to my Patreon. Hey, if you feel like it, check those out. There's a bunch of other links besides that. There's cool stuff. Give it a look, unless you don't feel like it, in which case, don't worry about it, because you're the council and I just run the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.